When people heard the name Pastor Lovy Elias, they immediately thought of a spiritual leader whose words carried power. His sermons were not just speeches, they felt like divine messages that touched hearts. Every Sunday, the church was filled with thousands of people who came with hope, waiting to hear his voice. His smile, his calm way of speaking, and the way he explained faith gave people comfort and strength. To many, he was not only a pastor, but also a guide who could take them out of darkness and lead them towards light. The church was called Revelation Church, and it became a place where people felt their struggles could find answers. Followers trusted him blindly. They believed his life was a reflection of honesty, faith, and family values. People would often say, "If there is anyone truly chosen by God to lead, it is Pastor Lovy Elias." His image was spotless, his influence was growing, and his followers treated him almost like a man who could do no wrong. But as life often shows, behind every perfect image lies a hidden truth. Sometimes, the brighter the light appears, the darker the shadow behind it. Revelation Church, which was seen as a sanctuary for the faithful, was quietly hiding secrets that no one could have imagined. Secrets that would one day shake the entire foundation of trust that people had built around their pastor. At first, the changes in Pastor Lovy's behavior seemed small, almost unnoticeable. He had always been busy with church work, but lately his absence felt different. His wife began to realize that he was spending less and less time at home. Dinner tables that were once filled with family conversations now sat in silence because he was either too late or too tired to join. When she would ask simple questions about his long hours, his answers were vague, sometimes defensive, as if he wanted to avoid any further discussion. She noticed that he had started guarding his phone more carefully. Earlier, he would leave it lying around the house without worry, but now it was always in his pocket or face down on the table. Late at night, she would see him step outside to take calls, speaking in a hushed voice as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. At first, she convinced herself that it was just the pressure of leading such a large church, but deep inside, her heart told her something was not right. Her uneasiness grew stronger when she looked into the church's financial activities. Small details began to catch her eye. She saw records of money being moved in ways that didn't make sense, expenses that had no explanation, and funds that were disappearing without clarity. Whenever she tried to ask him about it, he would quickly dismiss her, saying it was church matters that she wouldn't understand. But as his wife, she could feel he was hiding something from her. What hurt her even more was the emotional distance. The man who once prayed with her, laughed with her, and shared his deepest thoughts now seemed like a stranger living under the same roof. He became more secretive, more irritable, and at times even cold. She could not shake the feeling that the person she trusted the most was slowly slipping away from her, and with him, the truth she desperately wanted to uncover. It was only a matter of time before her suspicions would turn into shocking discoveries that would change everything she thought she knew about her husband and her church. The night that changed everything began like any other. Pastor Lovy had gone to bed early, claiming he was exhausted from meetings and counseling sessions at the church. His wife, still restless with doubt, stayed awake in the living room, her mind racing. She felt torn between trust and suspicion, between being a supportive wife and following her instincts. Something inside her whispered that the answers she was searching for were closer than she thought. When she walked past his study, she noticed his laptop still open on the desk. At first, she hesitated. She knew that looking into his private things would cross a line, but the uneasiness in her heart was too strong to ignore. With trembling hands, she sat down and opened the screen. What she saw froze her completely. Emails and messages, hidden exchanges that spoke of more than just church business. There were conversations with certain members of the congregation that crossed boundaries of respect. Words of affection, late-night promises, and emotional connections that no pastor should ever have with someone other than his wife. Her heart sank as she scrolled further, realizing the man she trusted as her husband and admired as a leader was living a double life. But that wasn't the only discovery. Among the files, she found documents and receipts that revealed financial irregularities. Large sums of church donations were being funneled into personal accounts, expenses marked under false names, and transactions that had nothing to do with the ministry. Her hands shook, her eyes filled with tears, and her chest tightened with pain. She whispered to herself, "How could he do this? How could the man who preaches about truth and loyalty be the very one breaking it all?" In that moment, her suspicion turned into undeniable reality. The betrayal was no longer a shadow in her mind. It was written in front of her in black and white. From that night on, she knew her life would never be the same. The man she once believed in had shattered the foundation of trust, not only between husband and wife, but between pastor and church. And now, she faced the impossible decision of what to do with the truth she had uncovered. For days, she carried the weight of what she had discovered, unsure of how to face the man she once called her partner in life and faith. Every time she looked at him, she saw not just her husband, but a stranger, a man who had deceived her and betrayed the church that trusted him. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing day, until finally she could no longer hold back. The truth demanded to be spoken. One evening, as he returned home from the church, she waited in the living room. Her eyes were filled with quiet strength, though her heart was trembling. He noticed the serious look on her face and asked casually, "Is everything all right?" But she didn't answer with small talk this time. Instead, she placed a folder on the table, the evidence she had gathered from his laptop and financial records. "Lovey," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." At first, he laughed nervously, pretending not to understand. "Talk about what? I'm exhausted. Can we do this another time?" But she didn't move. She looked straight into his eyes and said, "Don't lie to me anymore. I know everything." His smile faded. He tried to deny it, insisting she was misunderstanding things, twisting the truth. But with every excuse he made, she slid another piece of evidence across the table: emails, messages, receipts. The more she revealed, the quieter he became. His words of denial grew weaker, until finally he sat in silence, his head bowed, unable to defend himself any longer. Tears welled up in her eyes as she asked the question that burned in her soul. "How could you do this to me? To us? To the church that trusted you with their hearts and their faith?" Her voice cracked, not just with anger, but with deep sorrow. For the first time, Pastor Lovy had no sermon to preach, no charm to hide behind, no excuses strong enough to cover his betrayal. He simply sat there, trapped by the truth, while his wife realized that the man she thought she knew had already been lost long ago. That night was not just a confrontation between husband and wife. It was the breaking point where lies collided with truth, and the mask of a respected pastor finally began to fall apart. After that night, she realized silence would only make her part of the lie. For days, she wrestled with her heart. Should she protect her husband and keep the secret hidden, or should she stand for the truth, even if it meant tearing down the very image he had built? It wasn't just about their marriage anymore. It was about the church, the thousands of people who trusted him, and the God he claimed to serve. Keeping quiet felt like betrayal too. Finally, she made her choice. She gathered the evidence, emails, messages, financial documents, and shared them first with a few trusted members of the church council. At first, they were shocked, refusing to believe her. "This can't be true," one of them whispered. "Pastor Lovy would never do such a thing." But when she laid out the proof, their faces turned pale. The evidence was undeniable. The truth began to spread like wildfire. Members of the congregation who once defended him started to question everything. Whispers filled the church hallways, and soon the story reached the larger community. It was no longer a private matter between husband and wife. It had become a scandal shaking the foundation of Revelation Church. When the news broke publicly, reactions were explosive. Some loyal followers still refused to believe, calling it lies meant to destroy God's servant. But many others felt betrayed, hurt, and angry. Families who had donated their savings, people who had looked up to him as a spiritual father, now felt they had been deceived. For the first time, Pastor Lovy stood before his congregation not as a man of respect, but as a man surrounded by doubt and shame. His wife's voice echoed louder than his own sermons, because this time she wasn't speaking with charm or performance, she was speaking with truth. The betrayal was no longer hidden behind closed doors. It was out in the open, and it divided the church into two sides, those who still clung to his image, and those who chose to face the reality.